Welcome, everybody, to the Dr. Leadership Lounge, where we have conversations with business leaders from all walks of life about how and why they are successful. Hey, everybody, welcome to the next edition of the Leadership Lounge. This is Dr. Leadership here. The doctor is in, and I am extremely thankful to have our guest today, Mr. Stan Phelps of Stan Phelps Speaks. He is a world-renowned executive coach. He has been on TED Talks. He's been featured in Forbes. He is instructed at both Rutgers and New York University. A very well-known author of, it's got to be close to a dozen books now, the Goldfish Series that we'll touch on. But first and foremost, Stan Phelps, I would like to welcome you to the Leadership Lounge. How you doing?
It is a good-looking lounge. I'm glad to be here.
Don't look at the carpets. I keep the lights low in here, so you don't know what's actually happened in the past. But hey, Stan, I really do appreciate you joining us. And, just to kind of give folks an idea, we were joking before we got on the phone here a little bit, and I saw that Delta Airlines had sent you a personal thank you for being the million miler. 1.3 million or something you said now. That's getting it going on. That is traveling.
You know, I write about the idea, Brent, of like doing little things to reinforce warmth and competence. And so I was flying just this past Sunday from Dallas to Atlanta, and it was a Minneapolis St. Paul flight crew that was on that flight, and they gave me this nice little postcard. I think you probably saw it on LinkedIn, thanking me for being a million miler. And I loved it. They're like, wishing you all the best over the holidays. We're going to try to keep climbing, which is one of the slogans from
their
Delta.
tagline.
I thought it was a nice little small touch.
It's a great touch. And, you try to do little things like that, right? It's just be a positive influence on people every single day in some manner. Let's face it, you can go through life with a cloud over your head every day, or you can bring sunshine to people. And I've always been that. And I think that's why you and I have clicked. Just for transparency, Stan has helped me with my day job, my 60-hour-a-week regular thing, has been very helpful and supportive of my organization for several years now. And he was somebody I had kind of lasered in on this thing right away, because your concepts, I'm not saying you think like I think, but there's a lot of commonality there of it's about appreciation, and the differentiators are small things, and we'll get into that. But back to the million miler, just so everybody knows, Stan has been in Australia, the Philippines, and Dallas in the last 35 or 40 days. So you rack the miles up quick when you're the world traveler like yourself.
Right.
So
I mean, I've been just blessed. I've now spoken. The Philippines was my 19th country.
Wow.
This is one of the perks of going to the other side of the world. I had to stop somewhere, and so I just happened to stop in Doha and caught a World Cup game.
You can't hide money, Stan. I mean, that's just awesome. That is awesome. And what game did you get to see?
So I get to see the reigning World Cup champions. I saw Argentina in their last group stage game. They played Poland, and if Argentina would have went down, they wouldn't have moved on and wouldn't have got on the path to become World Cup champions. Yeah.
So I'm not as big a soccer guy, but my claim to fame in soccer. So they had it wasn't the European Cup, but what was it last year that Italy beat England on the penalty kicks?
That's the European Championships, yeah.
So the European Championships. So my wife and I, in 2019, for her birthday, went to Rome, spent a couple days, and then got on a cruise through Greece and Italy. And we got there the first day, and we were going to do this is awful. I had a private tour scheduled for the Vatican the next morning. We had to be there at 6:30. They opened it up to the 50,000 people a day at 9. We had to be ready to go at 7, and then we got a 2-hour head start on everybody. So, I mean, there was like 50 people in the Vatican we were walking through. We flew in the hotel we were staying at before we did that, and then one more night and then go on a cruise, was in Rome. And my wife did not sleep at all on the plane. So she goes, I'm going to lay down. We got there about 4 in the afternoon to the hotel, or 3 maybe. She lays down. I'm like, hey, I'm kind of on vacation. I'm going to, go down and take some pictures, walk around the park and get some pictures of the hotel. I go out and do some pictures, and I come back, and there's this bus, and there is literally 500 women there screaming, and guys are getting off this bus, and it's like Elvis is in the building. It's like, what's
It was
going
the
on?
Italian national
It's
team.
the Italian national team. So I go in, and they go in, and I'm asking the valet guys, who's that? Well, it's the national team. They got a big match tomorrow. They always stay at this hotel. Fast forward about 2 hours, I go up and check on my wife. I come down and go, well, I'm going to go down to the bar and get something to eat and sit. And I go down there, and there's the Italian national team. The guy that made the winning penalty kick, Bellini or something, I think is his name, is
Right.
sitting there. I've got pictures. I made the mistake of trying to party in Rome with 4 national Italian footballers. It got ugly. So the next day at the Vatican, I was praying for a lot of things, and one of them was just get me through today because I had gone a little
Right.
late with them. So I had a lot of fun. I have a couple of UK leaders on my team, and they were cheering real loud for the UK, and I was making fun of them and stuff. And I said, well, he's my buddy, the guy that beat you. Yeah, sure. And I brought up on
Wow.
the screen this picture of him arm in arm with me with a beer in our hands, and they're like, holy cow.
Wow.
So small
So
world, I just got
what
lucky.
that is crazy. And I'm not sure if you know this, but Italy didn't even qualify to go to the World Cup.
I didn't see him. And it's funny. So to go from winning the European Cup to not even making it into the games,
Yeah.
you know?
That's how in what's and we could talk about soccer for a while, but so it's 32 teams, so it's super competitive.
Sure.
Well, the next one in 4 years is going to be the US, Mexico, and Canada, and they're going to go from 32 teams, I think, to 48.
Wow.
So it's going to open things up dramatically.
I love it. It's so favorite time of year is also like March Madness and the playoffs. I
Right.
love that. That's all about camaraderie in the world. But great stuff. So I'm so
Yeah.
glad you got to see one. What a trip. So you basically
Yeah,
made the whole loop around the whole world, just about.
I did. I went as far as you could go without coming back.
You hit every
Thir-
time zone
13,
except one.
13, yeah, it was a plus 13-hour time zone.
Wow.
So I actually went a little bit further
Then
than you
halfway
could
around the
go.
world. Yeah.
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 But yeah, anyway, just
That's
a
great.
blessing to be able to do that. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and congratulations on all that. We're being heard in about 40 countries. I've had hit the podcast site, and I don't know if that's blind luck or just through the 6 degrees of separation of people I know on LinkedIn. So we're spreading our
Great.
wings too. But how I kind of wanted to start, you've been in executive coaching and marketing, kind of directional leadership and concepts for quite some time. How'd you get here? What's the Stan story to get here, or to 2012
Yeah.
when your first book came out? The Purple Goldfish, I think, was the first one in
Purple
2012.
Goldfish was the first one. Yeah, 2012. So it's been 10 years. So the brief history of Stan. So when I finished graduate school, I started my career working in sports on the agency side. I worked for a group called IMG,
Small
um,
little group.
and small little group, small little agency. And then from there, I went to the brand side, and I worked for Adidas, or most people that are
Man,
listening to this outside of the US, Adidas, which is the proper
Adidas.
way of
That's
saying
right.
it.
That's right.
So I worked for them for almost 9 years. I worked in Portland, Oregon, and I managed my background was in tennis. So I did tennis for the US. And then for a few years, I managed our relationship with the New York Yankees. So for a
Wow.
short time, for 3 years, my office was actually in Yankee Stadium. So that was my George
I was going to say
Costanza.
right next to George, the
That was
Georges,
my right
Costanza
next
and
to you
Steinbrenner,
jokes,
right?
but I was not that far from the travel secretary,
Isn't
and
that
George
great?
was the assistant.
Oh man,
So the Yankees won all 3 years I was there, so I was the good luck charm.
man.
And then I went and moved over to Europe. I worked in Amsterdam, and I managed what we did on the global side of tennis. And then when I met my wife while I was living in Amsterdam, she lived in the US. It forced me to move back. And so I worked with the PGA of America. I worked in golf for just about 2 years, managing marketing and events, a big event called the PGA Merchandise Show.
Yep.
And then I went from there back to the agency side of the business for a group called Synergy, where I was the number 2 at this agency. And I was responsible for all of our kind of business development and our creative.
Mm-hmm.
So going out and selling projects and working to pitch them. And it was there when I first started speaking. I realized very quickly that going to events and speaking was a great form of kind of marketing our agency.
Yep.
And so I said, well, what does it take for me to speak? And they're like, you have to have a little bit of thought leadership, and you have to write. And that started me down the trek of writing. And it was at a very interesting time around 2007. And I'm sure you remember this. Things were changing so quickly. It was right before the recession, but
Yep. Right before the
social
crash.
media was coming into its own.
Yep.
All media was fragmenting. It was just a really interesting time, and I saw marketing changing so quickly. And all I realized is that I was part of the problem and not part of the solution. And I spent a year writing across like every topic within marketing and within business, marketing and sales. And there was one thing I kept coming back to. And then I had this kind of seminal moment. I call it my moment of truth.
Yep.
On this rooftop bar in Manhattan.
I
And
was
that
reading that in the
small
intro
little,
to your latest book, Black Goldfish. It's a great story. I didn't mean to interrupt
yeah.
you, but just letting you know I've saw it. It's great.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I'll give the short story. So I'm at this rooftop bar with a colleague, and we're waiting to go to a networking event. So this is when I'm leading the agency, and I notice as we're drinking an $18 overpriced beer
That's right. A
that
short one.
there's this yeah. I'm and it's crowded rooftop bar, up 15 stories overlooking the skyline of Manhattan. And I noticed that there's an older gentleman. He was probably maybe like early 60s, sitting across from us, and he was by himself, Brent. And when I could see him get up every so often and scan the entire bar, and
Take a
it
look
became
around.
obvious to me he's waiting for someone, just like we were waiting for someone else to show up as well. And a half hour goes by and no one shows up for this guy.
Mm.
And so I start feeling bad for him. So I lean in just to start conversation. And I said something about, we spend 10% of our life waiting. And so that's actually a true stat. And I
Yeah,
tell people I know that's true because I once read it on the internet.
that's exactly right. Everything's true on the internet. Abe Lincoln said so.
Yes.
That's right.
Lincoln, I think, said that on the internet. That, yeah, 10% of everything you read on the internet is true. So we started going back and forth, and my dad was a big Vince Lombardi guy, and I probably said something
Yep.
pithy about like Vince Lombardi time,
This is a
like
football,
if you're
gentlemen.
not early,
Yeah.
you're not on time,
Yep. Yep.
And I'll never forget, this guy shot me the strangest look, and I kind of was taken back. He goes, on time. He said, no one in life is ever on time.
Hmm.
And I was like, get defensive. I'm like, wait, I've been on time before.
Yeah, the concept.
I go, not often. And he stuck his finger in my face and gave me the Dikembe finger wave. And he doubled down.
No, no,
And he
no.
went, no. He said, in fact, on time is a myth. He said, no one in life is ever just on time. He said, and it totally makes sense, right? People are either
Early or late.
or they're late. And it stuck with me. And I took the train home that night to Connecticut where I was living. And I thought to myself, that same thing applies in business and to the customers and the clients that we serve. And the idea is simply this: we never simply just meet the expectations of a client or a customer.
You're either short or
Right?
exceed them.
Right. There's no in between. You either do more or you fall short. And so right then it led me on a path. I mentioned I was looking for that one thing I wanted to go deeper in. It led me on a path to start to look for organizations that cared almost as much about the customer as they did chasing the prospect. and that those companies did little signature things to go above and beyond to win customers and influence word of mouth, to stand out. And I created this project, and I did the stupidest thing, Brent. I'm like, I'm going to collect 1,001 examples.
That's a big
Which is
task.
about this. Yeah, it is. It took me 27 months to crowdsource that many examples. I joke and I tell people, I go, I should have taken advice that someone once gave me about cross country skiing. Have you ever been cross country skiing?
Fortunately, no. I typically
Well, let
drive.
me tell you this. Let me tell you this. If you ever try it, it is super difficult.
Oh,
So
just going up
my
the
friend,
hills and the toe is the
yeah,
only
yeah.
connection point on the
Oh my
ski.
God.
I watch all that on the Winter Olympics and just go, oh my God, I'd die of exhaustion on the first curve, you know?
Right. So my friend who gave me this advice, and this is the advice I should have taken for this project I embarked on. He goes, Stan, he goes, you ever think about doing cross country skiing? He goes, here's my advice. He goes, start with a small country.
It's a great analogy, right?
So
Don't
I
don't
should have
pick
picked
Australia.
250. Yeah, I should have picked 250 examples. That
That's
would have
right.
been really impressive.
Well, you know how they build the
Um,
pyramids, right? One block at a time. How do you walk around the earth one step at a time? There's a lot of
right.
analogies there. He's a wise guy, wise man. But
Right. Well, I didn't have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. I could have eaten a donkey and
yep,
got there a lot quicker.
exactly,
So,
exactly.
so all that to say, over the next literally almost 2.5 years, I people would send me these examples. I would start to write about them. I started getting my blog syndicated in a couple places, and it led to the first book in the series. And I call these little things a purple goldfish. The goldfish is simply a metaphor for growth. Purple, the first three colors in the series are an ode to New Orleans, and
It's awesome.
that
The
got me,
beads.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that got me on the trajectory to write and to speak, and to advise.
Well, and I think, and that's wonderful. I mean, you left a dream job for millions of people. The bravery to take
Yeah,
that step, you know,
right.
is awe-inspiring as well, right? I mean, you had it going on, and to then say, "I've
Yeah,
got more," and I want to hear a little bit more about that. But the goldfish metaphor, if I remember correctly, is basically a growth item. As big as the bowl that you put them in is how big they're going to get, right? Their environment determines how much they can grow,
right,
right?
right. So yeah, there's you nailed one of the five. So there are five reasons why a goldfish grows, and those same five reasons, Brent, apply to everyone who's listening right now, to any organization that they're part of.
Absolutely.
And so the first one, and so I when I do my keynotes and workshops, I go
Yeah.
through the metaphor. The first one is, you nailed it. It's the size of the bowl or the pond that you're in, right? And the bigger the bowl, the more you can grow.
Sure.
So what's that? What's the size of the bowl? If you're in business,
It's
it's
the
simply
market.
the market.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The bigger the market you serve, the more you can grow. Well, the second one is like the biggest duh, like, of course, for a gold. So that if that's a direct correlation, the second one is an inverse correlation. So the growth of a goldfish will be also determined by the amount of other goldfish in the bowl or the pond,
Got it.
right?
Got
So
it.
the more goldfish there are,
The
it
smaller
will
you'll
stunt
stay.
their
That's
growth.
right. You're
So
sharing
who
the
are the other
resources available. The opportunity is shared.
well, here even simpler than that, who are the other
The
goldfish in
competition.
business? Yeah, the competition, right?
Yep.
Now, number three of the five, I would tell people, especially over the last 2.5 years, I go, this used to be the most difficult of the five for you to get until March 13th, 2020 happened. And I go, if you were a goldfish, your growth is also determined by the quality of your surrounding environment. So the amount of nutrients that are in the water, how cloudy that water is, will impact your growth if you're a goldfish. So I want you to think kind of macro. When you think about those outside, that outside environment, what is that in business?
Well, it could be economic. It could be all sorts
No,
of
you hit the net. You hit the nail
economic.
on the head.
Yep,
It's one word. It's the
the
economy,
economy. Okay. Hey,
right? Your
I'll tell you
ability
what. I
to,
paid attention. I paid
yeah,
attention.
your ability, yeah, there you go. Your ability to get capital, consumer confidence, and people's willingness to purchase, supply chain regulations, tariffs, global pandemic. All of those things will influence your ability to grow in business. Number four is really simple. So, how that goldfish does in their first 4 months of life will determine ultimately how big they get.
Yep.
So, the better start that they have, the more that they're set up. In fact, this is an interesting fact. Goldfish, when they're born, have 80 to 100 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
And they are tiny when they're born.
Oh yeah, I bet.
In fact, a baby goldfish is called a fry,
Yep.
as in small fry. That's where small fry comes
That's where it
from.
comes from. That's
And
awesome.
and so how they get out of the gate is absolutely important. So what do you called your first 4 months in business? You're a
FN.
startup.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
FNG.
FNG.
And we will not discuss that
Right.
acronym any further.
But here's the thing also too, and I want you to think about this. When you launch a new product or service, that same thing applies.
That's right.
How you do in that critical first 120 days will determine how big you get. So far we've talked about the size of the bowl is the market, the other goldfish are competition, that surrounding environment is the economy, and how you do in the first 4 months is what you're like when you're a startup. Well, number five, if you're a goldfish, and the last one is the idea of your genetic makeup. So how strong your genes are, and the stronger they are, and the more that you're separated from the other goldfish, the bigger you typically grow. If your genes are weak and you're like everyone else, the less you typically grow. So
The strong
this
survive.
is a little,
Yep.
yeah, well, this is a little different. So what is genetic makeup in business, especially as it relates to your product or your service? It's simply the extent that you are different and how different you are compared to everyone else.
Value adds
And
and things that differentiate you. It's
and,
great.
and I would argue that for the longest time you would differentiate based on the product or service that you provide, maybe even your location. But we live in a flat world, and I would tell you it's harder and harder to truly stand out just on your product or service, but it's how you deliver that experience, and it's also why you deliver it that makes you stand out.
Agreed. Your why has to be worn on your sleeve, right? I always tell my
Absolutely.
yeah,
So it's not the what, it's the how
and the
and
why.
the why.
Yep.
And here is the challenge. I tell people, if you've already been in business for more than 4 months, right?
Yep.
We can chuck that one out. You have four left. No one listening right now has control over the market.
Yep. The economy is not in our hands.
Right. And unless you're acquiring your competitors, the only one you have control over is genetic makeup. How do you stand out in what I would call a sea of sameness? And the research backs it up. Gartner looked at enterprises. 90% said the number one thing that they're going to compete on is the experience that they provide to their customers.
That's right. Can you provide
And
the feel good to them? Right.
yeah, and I'll
Avoid.
even give you one more because at the end of the day, you don't differentiate just for your customers. You differentiate to give your customers a reason to talk about you. We don't talk about 3 stars, right?
That's
And
right.
here's the thing, when you ask businesses, Brent, what is your best form of marketing?
Word of mouth. Word of mouth.
Word of mouth. 95% of organizations say number one thing, word of mouth. In fact, Google comes in at 59%. Right?
Crazy.
That's number 2. Now, here's the deal. You ask any organization, all right, you just told me word of mouth is your number one thing that you compete on. The follow-up question is, what's your word of mouth strategy?
Yeah. How are you attacking that opportunity? That's right.
What percentage of organizations have a defined word of mouth strategy?
It's going to be single digits.
1%.
There you go.
That's not me saying that to be 11.
Nope, that's 1%.
That's
that's the lowest single digit other than 0. Let's face it.
And so, and we'll talk about kind of the progression of how this led me down the path. I'm a marketing guy.
Yep.
I truly thought it had to be the sun, rose and set on the customer. Well, when I studied over 1,000 examples, Brent, it became crystal clear to me that the companies that truly got this concept, and the concept I write about is a concept called Lanyap, of doing a little something extra, going beyond the transaction, they even got it more so for their own employees. In fact, most of them put their employees first and their customers second.
That's funny.
I never even saw a second book until I made that realization.
This flashes me back. It's funny. So when I first started in this business in late '89, well, no, it was when I came to my current employer, Rico. It was a dealership that was owned by Alco Standard and that whole transition. But we wore buttons, and they said, "We're number 2." That's all the button said. And everybody, when you come in, you had on your lapel your suit. Everybody suited up every day, right? And you're out making cold calls at first, trying to develop relationships. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have cell phones. You had to go out, and it was shoe leather time. And you'd walk in, and every time someone would go, well, who's number 1? You are. And they just light up, right? And you have to take the same approach with your internal customers too. I speak a lot about being empathic. Everybody is dealing with something, and then you have situational leadership. Every individual on my teams and in life, you're talking about your children, your other relationships, your spouse, everyone looks at things through different lenses, and you have to be able to understand those different viewpoints to get the most out of those relationships. And by understanding the customer and putting them first, and your employees have to, the best thing in the world is to have an employee that believes in their company wholeheartedly, because that is a contagion. Customers can feel it. It's like confidence too. It's like when you win an opportunity, go out and make another call, because your entire mantra and your entire vibe is different in front of the next person you're calling on, because your confidence level is higher. If I believe, and I do believe, that my current employer, Rico, is the best in our industry, it's not even close. And when I'm in front of prospects and customers, and I don't speak near as often as you do, but I speak for a living too. That's kind of my job, is to lead through the big opportunities and lead the staff. When you stand up there and you believe in your core that you're going to handle them correctly, that belief becomes their belief. It's a contagion, right? It's a contagion that happens. So that's just awesome stuff. My wife always says, I was telling her I was going to talk to you about the Goldfish book, and she goes, they only have a 10-second memory. Best thing about a goldfish, they could be a salesperson. You got to have a short memory. And I go, I don't remember that being one, but I'm going to bring it up. She goes, because, goldfish can get caught, and they're going to bite at the same hook again next time it drops in the water,
Right. So they get a bad rap. We actually humans have now a shorter attention span. I think we're now to like 8.5 seconds.
Oh, jeepers.
And they're at like 10 seconds. So yeah, they're actually, there's been studies done have a memory up to like 6 months or longer.
Well, I think
They
when
can
they were asking,
recognize their owner.
I think the goldfish were lying though when they told them how long they remembered stuff. Just between you and me, I think they're lying. That's funny. You know you had talked about 2007. I'll give you a little. You've given me a bunch of nuggets here on just information and reference points. But you were talking about the amount of data, and the world was going crazy in 2007 when you're starting to think about this thing.
Right.
And I've talked on the podcast a couple times. You know, the Library of Congress is, just for a round number, 250 years old. Took us 250 years to fill the physical building. You know, 20 million periodicals, 100 million videos and images, thousands or hundreds of thousands of speeches, millions of books, governmental records, everything. Took us 250 years to fill that thing up. That much data moves on the internet every 1.6 minutes. Think about that. It's just it just blows your mind.
I'll give you another one that dates back to about the same time, 2007, 2008. So back then there were 500 million devices that were connected to the internet. So that was one device for every 12 people on the planet.
Yep.
Fast forward to today, and I think that number is hovering around like 50 billion.
So
devices.
It's 6.5 devices for each person now. You know, think of it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing when, and I was just reading about it today. The Japanese have talked about this idea of going to like society 5.0, where it's the physical world and the digital world are kind of connected and intertwined. We're getting past even the information age.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's an interesting time on how rapidly, you know, and I've got a whole book on technology, data, and analytics, and you only have to go back, you know, less than 65 years ago to the advent of Silicon Valley and, you know, the modern age of computing.
Oh, how fast we're doing stuff. One of the examples I've used in the past is, you know, it took us 15,000 years to fly 10 feet in the air for 30 seconds on the beaches in North Carolina, right? 60 years after that, we're landing men on the moon. Strap them on a rocket, let's go. That 60 years to, you know, 30,000, 60,000, don't get caught up in how long man has been around, but you get the point.
Right.
Now, the things we're talking about brain chips, and you know, you talk about these different number of devices for everybody. How come we don't have an Apple Watch? I'm a watch guy, but I'm a traditional watch guy because I love the engineering of it. I'm like, well, first of all, I don't want another thing that beeps at me that I'm late or missing doing something. I've got a wife. I've got an iPhone. You know, I got enough people telling me I'm late. I'm not doing something right. Another message. You know, you think about it. You got Teams messages. You got instant messaging. You've got email. You've got phone. You can get caught up in it. And this technology advance, the only thing I would say is just we got to be careful with this stuff, because I think a lot of the technology, we're starting to see the negative impacts from a societal standpoint. There is not a village any longer. We don't have discourse. We have
echo chambers.
Echo chambers. And the other thing that we have is passive aggressiveness is at an all-time high, right? Everybody's tough from 1,000 miles away. Just because we can may not mean we should on some of these technological advancements. We got to be careful there. And, you know, I talk about communication in one of the podcasts, right? I texted them. Well, give them a call. Well, I emailed them and I haven't heard from them. Pick up the phone. You know, there's this thing I always say, it's A.G. Bell. Had it figured out. That's Alexander Graham, for those that don't know it.
Right.
To be able to build a relationship, first of all, hand-to-hand, face-to-face, human nature is to be helpful and to be interactive if you're in person.
Right.
You become zeros and ones and just, it's like it's not even existing. And we've lost that. We've lost the village mentality. We've lost the friendship mentality, the helping each other. You know, I always say, concentrate on, can I help you? Hold the door open. Say thank you. Say please. Have a nice day. Shock people with interaction because our society needs it. We need it.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice way to come back to experience because I think the bar has gotten so low. And we were just talking about Delta handing me something that was handwritten, right?
What an
That's so old
unbelievable thing.
school.
Yeah, but it's so good school. You know what I
Right,
mean? It's like,
right,
man, oh man, some things are just the easy button. You know,
right,
hard
right,
work is not, Dick Vermeil, we were talking earlier, you listened to it. Hard work is not a form of punishment. Work is the
right,
means to success. Feel
right.
blessed that you can work hard
And to
because that's,
solve problems and to
yeah,
meet opportunities. Yeah, I thought that was a nice thing he said about his dad
yeah,
and what his
just
dad
great.
taught him.
Yeah, you know, my dad used to always say, "I only want you to work." I think I said it to him. My dad used to say, "I only want you to work half days, son. You pick which half, 7 to 7 or 7 to 7." And you know, he's a World War II vet. He's old school. He's a little older than Dick, even he's gone now. But some of those things, you know, when I was young too, we always think that we're smarter than those that came before us, and the
Right,
experience factor we have to let still play in our world, right? They've gone. The way you don't make mistakes is through experience, and the way you gain experience is through making a lot of mistakes. It's a vicious cycle,
right.
and we need to
Hmm.
listen to our elders. You know, that's why past civilizations always referred to the elders for decision making because they had seen things before.
Right.
And I think we got to be careful there. We want, you know, on one of your books you talk about in the gray goldfish
Right.
about the gray areas of managing or leading or communicating with. We all have 5 different generations of people that we interact with now.
First time in the history of the workforce, five distinct generations.
It's incredible.
Um, yeah, and I'm Gen X, so I'm what's
Yep.
called the sandwich generation.
Yep.
I've got two above me and two below me,
I'm right with you. Same
and
gen. Same gen.
yeah, so it's an interesting time to have to kind of navigate up and down. Um, and simply the one size fits all approach um, is no longer valid, and you've got to learn to meet people on their own terms. And I liked how you talked about being empathetic, and show that you care. Um, yeah, I think it's a really interesting and time to be in the workplace coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah. How do you think? Speaking of the pandemic, I mean, it's the big elephant in this world. You know, I say we're about to approach, I think, the 33rd month of the year 2020. You know, it just
Right.
keeps going on and on. In your travels and in your discussions with organizations, I mean, the cheese has moved for everybody. Let's face it. It
Right.
is a different world. This hybrid workforce and things, culture development touched on that. You know, now how I approached it was you have micro cultures in your work environment and macro cultures. Macro is the big company culture, right? We're gonna these are our 5 pillars or whatever number of pillars you have. The micro
Right.
cultures are your team or the support, your subject matter experts you work with every single day. You have more interaction there, so that culture becomes more important because it's kind of your center. And then as you go
Right.
out, the cultures change a little bit. And we haven't lost culture with these changes. It's just changed on how we develop it, create it, and sustain it. A lot of leaders inside of organizations are Gen X or even older,
Right.
or late Gen Xers. And they have, you know, you wear a suit and tie, you pick up the phone every time, you do this step, then this step, then this step. A lot of that's moved, and those old things that used to work, a few minutes ago I said you got to use some of the old things because they're still good, but then you got to
Right.
realize what aren't. How have you seen, or what's your insights on how this world has changed specific to leadership and building relationships with customers and those types of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot has developed. Let's talk about just the workplace in general. I think going into the pandemic, flexibility was a big thing for the millennials and the
Yep.
Gen Zs that were just entering the workforce, 5 years ago. Um, and it was something that they valued. I think purpose was also more important to them than it was to the older generations. They wanted to feel like they were part of something,
Yep.
that the companies that they worked for stood for something and were, part of making society better.
Yep.
Um, and then, so what's interesting is that you have, the Gen X's like us, which, we're the first ones to actually develop a sense of kind of work-life balance and life outside of work, and maybe even playing as hard as you worked.
Right.
Whereas, the boomers that came before us, a lot of what they were defined by their work. If you ask them what they did, it may take them a minute or two to even get to their families, let alone their hobbies.
That's right.
And for those boomers, it was about FaceTime. It was about showing up early. Getting time with your boss was seen as like a critical benefit.
That's right. That's how you promote it up.
You Yeah, it's and then you go, like, my father-in-law is with us for the holidays right now. He's 92, Brent. He worked until he was 89. Now,
Incredible.
he had kind of pared back in his last 15 years of work of still doing maybe like 3 days a week,
Yep.
but he was on his feet and putting in a full day, three of the 7 days till he was 89. So it's not unrealistic that you might be working with people that are in their mid to late 70s, even into their 80s.
Yep.
And they're part of what many consider the greatest generation.
Mm-hmm.
They have a much different way of looking at the world and a sense of honor and duty.
Yep. Very village
Of being
focused.
part of
That's right. The community
yeah.
focused. Yep.
And so it's the idea that you don't treat everyone the same. If you're going to succeed as a leader, you need to meet people where they're at. I think you need to give them flexibility. I have a friend, Denise Leon. I just read a post that she did today, and she talked about this concept of unified, not uniform, right? It's not the one size fits all, but there are things you can do to create that unified sense of culture
Mm-hmm.
without mandating culture. Um, and so I think it's an interesting time. There was a stat that I share that absolutely floored me, and it goes to flexibility. They asked people, they said, would you rather take a $30,000
I
bump
saw
in
this
your
in the
salary,
in the black book. This is unbelievable.
or would you rather have complete flexibility on how and where you did your job? And 2 out of 3 people said, give me the flexibility.
That's almost as
And that
many.
was
That's almost as high a percentage as dentists that recommend Wrigley gum.
right. 7 out of 10
Yeah,
almost,
4 out of 5 dentists recommend Wrigley gum. I
right.
mean, they're almost that good. But
Yeah,
she's right,
yeah,
or I
yeah.
shouldn't say she's right. She You had talked about where I was going with this is the former CEO of PepsiCo, and I'm drawing a blank. Oh, an Indian lady, Ida.
Indra
Yes,
Nuri, I think.
yes,
Yeah,
that is exactly. She was
yeah,
real big on performance for purpose.
right.
Again, it's another way of saying the why, right? It's why are
Yeah,
you doing it? What is your passion? What is it you're driving to?
right,
And I think that's really critical. And it has changed a bunch. Flexibility, we're never going back to how it was. It's just not going to be there. The flexibility is
right.
there. This hybrid workforce, part in, part home. I've worked from home for about 11 years now.
Hmm.
At least part of the time. I've been full time home office and then travel for a decade. And
Hmm.
if you don't have the right mindset, it can be degrading to performance. But
Right.
if you're a go-getter, and this isn't a self commercial, I'm not saying it because I think I do well working from home, but just a general statement. If you are productive and know you owe the work to the company or to the cause, you're highly more productive at home because you're
Right.
typically happier. Didn't have the commute each direction. Um, you have immediate access to the technology. Now, the bad side of that is many people say we work from home, but what it can become is we live at work. So then it becomes a
Right.
balance issue and a
Mm-hmm.
burnout issue, because that's the next thing that's happened. You had the Great Resignation because you couldn't get away from it. It is
Right.
conference call and Teams meeting after Teams meeting. Your calendar is how people know you. You used to be able to get up and go get a cup of coffee or a soda and step away for a minute, step out of the meeting room for a minute. You have 30 minutes open on your calendar, and you get up in the morning and go, hey, I'm going to have time to actually maybe make a quick sandwich or a bowl of soup. And you look up 20
Right.
minutes later and somebody's pinged in and taken that 30 minutes. So it just keeps coming at you and coming at you. And suddenly, if I have a day
Yeah.
where I don't have 14 individual meetings to discuss something, I feel
Right.
like it's a light day. This is awesome. So
Right.
it's a
I would,
balance.
yeah, I would say it's a little bit of balance. I think also, to get a little tactical, it's about blocking and it's about separation.
Mm-hmm.
And similar to you, I've worked in in a home office for the better part of the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And here is the challenge. It is creating those and protecting those blocks on your calendar when you do your creative work, or when you're at your best
Mm-hmm.
in terms of working the business. And then it is also trying to create in your physical place what I would call buffer zones, or distinct areas where you only do work, and to try to create that separation.
Yeah,
Now that may be
yeah,
harder when you have an apartment as opposed to floors in a house, or a house with a bigger floor plan. But I think creating that separation, because when you're never in either world, is when it starts to get murky.
that's right. That's right. I try
Yeah.
to only work in the office, in the home. If I'm somewhere
Yeah.
else, I try to make it, about personal time. And you got to take care of yourself first, right? I mean, mentally, to be at your best.
Right.
I've found myself actually now putting on my calendar, blocking an hour or an hour and a half out each day. It might be 30 minutes in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, and I just call it planning. Everybody has access to my
Mm,
calendar, but I'm
right.
planning on how to be better the next day. I'm planning on how to move the market. I'm planning on how to help develop others. I'm planning on how to get better myself. I'm planning on how to be a better husband. I'm planning on how to be a better father. Planning can be a lot of things.
I
But
like that. You're coming up with like code. I like that.
yeah, so it's in today's world, so I started the podcast and we talked about this a little bit, but the reason I started is because this new remote world we're in, right? You used to go into an office, and if you were an individual
Right.
contributor, you watched the best individual contributor and saw what she did on how do I get to the top of the stack rankings, right? How do
Right.
I make trip? If you wanted to be a manager, you watched the manager. Maybe there was some internal mentoring program. The manager would say, hey, come and join a meeting, those types of things.
Right.
Manager wanted to be a director, they'd watch the director. The director wanted to be the vice president, he would watch her as the vice president and interact. We've lost this training, this interaction, these concepts, the transfer of
Hmm.
knowledge, right? How you, um, Dick Vermeil had another great one. You can be told lots of things, but you don't forget experiences. You can read
Right.
something, you can be um, told something, whatever might be the case, but what you really hold on to are you have memories of an experience, and that's how we
Right.
learned and how we developed the leadership of the future and those types of things.
Hmm.
Succession planning, that was the word I was looking for, struggling for. Now I'm trying to deliver through this concept and this communication method of podcasts and streaming and things of that nature, virtually, some ideas that maybe people aren't getting. And I also wanted to tie it into you aren't just a leader in your business life, but we need to be leaders in our community and we need to be
Right.
leaders in our households, because we have lost the village mentality. I was raised by World War II parents. My mom's 93 and sharper than you and I hope to be today. I mean, it is unbelievable. And I'm not kidding. She will talk about any policy on the political spectrum. She will talk about World War II. She'll talk about the Depression. Then it's coming around Christmas time. You know, she's done this to us in the past. My sister, a couple years ago, we're all there. There's 20 of us in a circle. We're holding hands. We do the prayer before the meal. And then she says, I want everybody to go around and say, what's the best thing you've ever received for Christmas? And it wasn't about being about things, but it's like, what the best guess or what the best gift you ever got. And it came to me, and I had proposed to my wife on the Christmas holiday a few years before. And I said, the greatest gift I received was my wife saying yes. And I'm not being mushy on purpose, but that's what I said. Some people said that vacation or this item, whatever it was. It went to my mom, and she goes, I remember when I was 5, and it was during the Great Depression. It was 1934. And I got an orange and a piece of rock candy, and I thought I was the luckiest. And you saw 19 heads drop in complete embarrassment on how we were viewing the world for a few minutes.
Right.
And that's when you look over and you go, the matriarch has spoken. I mean, she's our Queen Elizabeth. I mean, she is just, she is awe-inspiring to everyone she's met. She's 5'2" when she was young, 5 foot now, and she still argues with the nurse when they measure. And she goes, no, I'm 5'2". Well, you shrink a little bit, Mom. But she is a giant in the community, and we need to. So anyway, I was inspired to try to help others like you do, right? You're going out and helping people take the blinders off of what they thought was the right thing, get into situational leadership. How do we differentiate ourselves? How do we treat each individual differently? But most importantly, lean in. I always say to my people, lean into it.
Right.
Don't.
I want to share one thing, because you were talking about how it's becoming more difficult because we may not be in that environment where we can soak in and watch others.
Yep.
So when I did the Green Goldfish, which is all about reinforcing culture and driving employee engagement, and doing the little things, the idea of green is kind of going beyond dollars. Mm-hmm. To do the little things that can drive engagement. Well, the one I absolutely love, and I think it would be such a cool thing for a lot of companies to do now, is a program that the company Evernote founded. So do you know Evernote? It's like a note-taking app.
I don't think I'm familiar with it. No, well, it sounds like it's supposed to be, I guess, as Evernote.
If you want to take, a lot of people like to take notes on their phone or whatever. Yep. It's and you can, anyway, at the company, the founder of the company, one of his friends, Brent, was an officer on a nuclear submarine. A Triton nuclear submarine. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that you cannot be an officer on a Triton nuclear submarine, and this makes sense, to how to do every job on the submarine.
Yep.
Yeah. So he was inspired by this. So at Evernote, he created a program that he called Officer Training. And anyone in the company could raise their hand to try to be part of it. And it was such a simple thing. For the people that were part of that program, one time a week, they would get scheduled into a meeting in a different part of the company.
What a great idea.
Can you imagine that? So 1 week you're in sales, 1 week you're in operations, 1 week you're in finance, 1 week you're in customer service. And I mean, on and on. You could go to 6 different departments in each of those, right? And I thought that was just, what did it cost? Nothing.
The cost of not doing it is huge. It reminds me a little bit, I'm not a big reality TV guy. I actually despise reality TV. But one that I always thought was a good idea was Undercover Boss, right? The CEO of the company takes the lowest level job to see what it's like to really be an employee of the company. And it leads to change, right? It leads to, I can't believe that I have allowed this to happen. At the foundation, the customer facing, the foundational support and employees inside the organization, and big changes happen. And I love that idea of moving people around and trying to experience other things, because then you have perspective, right? It's walk a mile in someone else's shoes there for a minute. That's going to lead to nothing but good things, better understanding, understanding their context and their perspective and point of view leads to better communication. Also leads to, one of the big things I always try to tell my professionals is understand the service side of our business, because the reason we don't discount, first of all, we're more valuable than that, but second of all, how important is the service industry? And once you're over there and see what they go through, you understand what our worth is. When
Right.
I'm in competitive situations and someone says, well, your competition is 10% less than you, and I say, well, I guess they understand their value better than anybody else. And you just kind of say, and it's not an aggressive comment.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
then the
Right.
other thing I will do in those situations, I'll say, what do you think would be a fair margin for me to make on this? I mean, what's your margin in your organization? And they go, I
Right.
think a fair
Right.
margin would be 30%. And I will typically say after that, well, I am willing to take the price I presented to you instead of raising it 10%. You've just told me I should be worth 30%. I'm aggressively priced to you. Can
Right.
we get past the price now and talk about the cost of not doing business with me? How I can
Right.
deliver better things for your organization? Because there's a price and a cost, right? I mean, anybody can
Right.
charge anything. You can build a
Right.
house for $100,000, or you can build a house for $1 million. People
Right.
typically don't want to live in the $100,000 house once it's done, and you
Right. Well,
just
I tell people price is what you pay, value is
is
what
what
you
you get.
get.
That's right.
And
That's right.
it's trying to find ways to add either. I think the core of, if you boil down the whole goldfish philosophy, it's about how do you find ways that you can add signature value,
Mm-hmm.
right, in the areas that you want to stand out in. And two, it's about how you reduce the effort and make it easier for your customers and clients to do business with you.
Great concepts. Great concepts.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
You mentioned Brent, like trend wise, what I see.
yes.
I think another big one, and I think younger generations expect this because they just live their lives with full transparency.
Mm-hmm.
But it's running as a leader, running your organization and being almost as transparent as you can in sharing information within your organization.
Undoubtedly one of the greatest characteristics of a leader. In my heart
Yeah,
of hearts, they need to understand the why.
right,
Here's what the organization, why we're doing this, or here's why I'm making that decision, or here's what we're trying to do in moving the market, or the reason we can't do that is this. You don't just say yes or no. You
right,
say, I would love to be able to do that, but let me give you some things to contemplate on why we can't, or why we
right,
shouldn't, or whatever it might be. I don't like words can't. I'll get on phone calls. We're trying to, we got a hot situation, and someone will get on, and I'm kind of a tongue-in-cheek guy, and I'm an analogy guy, and they'll say, well, we can't do this, can't do that. And I say, okay, the can't department has responded. I'd like someone from the how we're gonna department
the can't depart.
jump in here and help us fix this. I understand that there are barriers in our way, but if you were the
Right.
customer, would you accept this approach to the problem
Yeah.
solving? And no, you wouldn't. So
Right.
I want it's got to be good for the customer, then it's good for the company, then it's good for the rep. And if we use it in that order, you're typically going to
Right.
have good retention, et cetera. So tell me a little bit. So you have all the colors of the books. You had purple, green, gold, blue, red, pink, yellow, gray, diamond, and now black. And I think it's because it's all the combination of the colors. Tell us a little bit
Right.
about Black Goldfish, the latest book.
Yeah. So the and by the way, you missed silver in there. I'd
Ah,
be
I
remiss
was taking
if you
notes and
you you
everything.
went from diamond to black. You
Ah,
forgot silver. So yeah,
so ashamed.
black is the 11th color, and it would be hard to say color because we've got some gems and some metals in the mix. But
The
let's not
periodic
let the
table
truth
is
get
at play at stanphelps.com, ladies and gentlemen.
let's not let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That's
So
right.
black is, you get the color black, and if you remember with having small kids and when they started to play with paint, right?
Oh, yeah.
And eventually all of the paint would get mixed together.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't create black. Let's be
It's
honest.
an
It's
ugly
probably
color.
like a
Yeah, that's right. It's not
yeah,
very pretty.
an ugly grayish color. But typically, if you put all the colors in the spectrum together, you get black. And so the latest in the series, first hardcover in the series, first full color book that I've done in the series, is kind of a culmination of looking at the journey of all 10 colors and how that fits together in a collective approach to business. And creating, if I summarize the entire thing, how do you create what I call a differentiated experience?
That's your
Right? How do
DX.
you,
That's your DX
yeah,
in the
this
book, right?
concept of DX.
Right.
And how do you do that to drive growth and retention and ultimately word of mouth? Um, yeah, so it was just a really, this was there's 17 total books now in the series because we've got some 2.0 editions and some industry specific editions, but this really was a summation of 10 years of of writing
And
um,
experiences, right? I mean,
and
you're
experiences.
you're
Yeah,
absorbing all along and getting feedback. And uh, I have read a couple cover to cover. I'm as I told you earlier, I'm about 50 pages into black, and the concepts are rock solid, everybody. And I don't know where can they get access to the series, Stan? What's the easiest way for
yeah.
them to get
So
access?
yeah, easiest way on if Amazon is the place to go.
Yep,
Every with the exception of one, every book has a paperback or hardcover and an ebook. And
awesome.
then for four of the books, there's an Audible. So if you like audiobooks, you can get Purple, you can get Red, you can get Diamond, and you can get Pink on Audible.
Awesome. Well, if you ever need another Audible done, people say I have a voice and a face for radio.
For radio.
So
You do have a good. You could narrate. You could narrate an audiobook, I bet.
that's right. If I could only read, that would be the next thing. I'd have to check that box off and get hooked on Pahonics again. But it's it's a fun
Let me
thing.
ask you an important question.
Yes, sir.
Tell me why phonics does not begin with an F.
Well, as the great comedian, I don't know if there's a legitimate answer there or not, or if you're just asking because it's so funny. Brian Regan, years
Yeah.
ago, I gave a contemplation of stand-up comedy. I've always been the
Mm-hmm.
class clown and that kind of stuff, pretty quick-witted. And so I watch a lot of comedy. And I think that the world has lost its sense of humor. I think it keeps my sanity my wife and I enjoy nothing more than laughing with each other.
Right.
I mean, what a wonderful feeling. Extends your life, extends your happiness. It's good for your heart and soul. It's great. But Brian Regan talks about hooked on phonics, and he goes, now the whole concept doesn't work for me because wouldn't it be hooked on Pahonics? And it's just like, yeah, he's right. Great stuff. Super clean too. The guy hasn't dropped a 4-letter word in anything he's ever done. So if you're looking for that, but is that the answer, or is there a real
I
answer, or was it
I don't
just
know.
a?
My theory is that someone is playing a joke on us, and it's the same person that decided to make the B in dumb silent.
That's right.
I mean, come on. How cruel is that?
The English language is an entire spaghetti plate of challenges, right? I talk in communication about, the first thing to do is don't screw up the easy things, right? Understand
Right.
grammatical common sense, right? To type on a computer today, it almost does it for you. But learn
Right.
the difference of there, and they are, right? I mean, little things like that. People, and it's not frustrated, it's frustrated. And it's the little things that just drive me crazy with people.
Right.
And I don't get them all right, but man, some of these are easy ones. But it's a great concept that why's the B silent and dumb? Oh, that's
That's just
funny.
cruel.
It
It's
is
just
cruel.
cruel,
It
I
is
tell you.
cruel. It
Yeah.
is cruel.
Yeah.
So
Evil.
if you were to kind of look at your life and
Hmm.
all you've learned from leadership, are there a couple of core foundational blocks that you think leaders need? You know, we've talked about empathy and some of those things, but if you were
Right.
to put it down to three, four things for the
Ooh.
listeners, what
Yeah.
what what comes to mind? And I know that's a super wide open question, and you don't want to limit it to it, but are there a few things in this new world that you just think are must-haves, can't be
Yeah.
missed?
So I think, yes, I'll give you a couple. So one is the idea that business at its core is a zero sum game
Mm-hmm.
because it's all about, unfortunately, for a lot of companies, it's all about the transactional nature of business.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that most businesses that are successful, it's not about transactional, it's about the relationship. And so this concept of lanyap is the idea of doing a little something extra beyond the transaction, Brent, to
Mm-hmm.
honor the relationship, to show that you care, right?
What's that acronym?
Um,
Lanyap. What is that?
so lanyap is a Creole word. It dates back to the 1800s, so it's French and Spanish in
Mm-hmm.
origin,
Mm-hmm.
and it literally means the gift or to give more.
So it's an
And
actual
so if
word.
you're
It's not an acronym.
no, it's not. It's hard to spell. It's Lagniappe, and you'll love this. Mark Twain, in his autobiography, which is called Life on the Mississippi,
Yep, I've read it.
he spent a fair amount of time in New Orleans,
Yep.
and he said he recounted going to New Orleans, and he said lanyap, and this is how he described it. He said is a word worth traveling to New Orleans to get.
What a great storyteller he was, wasn't he? I mean, just
Oh,
a great
unbelievable.
humorist.
Unbelievable.
Again, back to the humor thing. So,
So that's the first one as it
yep.
relates to the customer is how are you doing the little things beyond the transaction to honor the relationship?
My
And if you're
wife is going to
smart,
just chew this up. She is all about relationship and the extra things and the thank you notes and the stopping
yeah.
by with cookies and understanding
The-
what their favorite food is and dropping it off with a note. Just was swinging by, I thought of you stuff, Awesome.
a- absolutely, and the second one, and it's right from my backyard, so I'm not taking credit for this. I live in Cary, North Carolina, which is home to a company called SAS.
Yep.
And Dr. James Goodnight started it.
Mm-hmm.
It came out of NC State University. It is I think it's the largest privately held software company in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and they are notorious for doing a lot of great things for their employees. And this is so simple. Dr. Goodnight says, he goes, this isn't complicated. He goes, if you treat your employees like they matter, they will.
Mm-hmm. What a simple concept.
Yeah. And so this concept of DX, it's about the customer, it's about the employee, and it's also about the brand. So I'll end with this in terms of a nugget.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes from the pink
I was
goldfish.
just going to say I want to touch on pink because it ties into how we'll finish up here in a second. My call
Yeah.
line too, but
And
how our flaws make us awesome.
yeah, so this is the idea is that, we unfortunately in business, we do this awful thing called benchmarking, right? Especially the leader in our category. We start to break down what makes the others in our category stand out. And whether we want to admit it or not, we start to emulate a lot of those same things.
Mm-hmm.
And what you realize, and what we realize by studying over 400 highly differentiated brands, is that there's only two ways to stand out. And it's not by doing more of what everyone else does, believe it or not. The only two ways to stand out, Brent, are to do more of what makes you weird, unique, and different, or And so that's the more philosophy, doing more of what makes you unique.
Or less
And then
of.
there's a less philosophy,
Yep.
doing less of what everyone else does as normal.
Yep.
You don't have to stand out by doing more. You can decide to do less.
So,
And so, yeah. And so the core is the idea of that your flaws, whether they're inherent or they're intentional, like the idea of doing less, deciding to do less.
Yep.
Those are the things that make you awesome. As we say, flawsome.
Yeah, flawsome. I love it. Yeah, I talked about in one of the podcasts, I said reset the meeting clock, right? We as problem solvers and leaders and humans, we think that to solve a problem, you have to do more of anything, something additional to solve a problem, to increase productivity, to insert whatever the goal is you're trying to attain. There's a subtractive concept that maybe we need to do less of something to improve. And I tied it into how many 1-hour meetings that got scheduled when COVID started in March 13th of 2020 are still on your calendar and carry zero value. Start subtracting. Blow the whole calendar up, start over again. And that was, I was speaking about burnout. You're burnt out because you've got all these things that have been there for 2.5 years that don't mean anything any longer. You're losing the concept of concentrating where you need to concentrate.
Right.
And just start with subtracting some things to make things better instead of putting more on the calendar. And it's just awesome. Just awesome.
I love it. I will even challenge you, I think that's great from a personal perspective. I think it's also great from an organizational perspective. I've heard a great number of organizations that have said, you know what? Wednesdays, no meetings.
Awesome.
or Friday afternoons, no meetings.
Yep.
Right? Or Monday morning when you're preparing for your week, no meetings.
Yeah.
Right?
I said
that out.
I said take all your weeklies, make them bi-weekly or every other week. Take all the hours, turn them into half an hours, and everything that was monthly go quarterly. I'm not talking customer requests and customer facing, but take everything and have it. And suddenly you're getting 20 hours back a week to fix customer issues, to launch, to get the first 4 months right of whatever the new thing is you're launching, to be different, to take customer care to the next level. We get caught. We're creatures of habit, right? We show back up at the trough, we put our head in and eat. How about we step back and say, what do we need to be doing different than sticking our head in the trough that we've been doing 2.5 years? It's just awesome. Just awesome. Hey, Stan, just great conversation. I'd love to have you back again because there's so much that you can give to the audience. So
when you change the carpets, I will come back.
Awesome. I will get the carpet now. Maybe just cleaned because it's a slim margin business. Zero sum. You've said it already. But I want to tie in here to your flaws make you awesome because something I say at the end of every Leadership Lounge and the end of every podcast, and I'm going to close here to all the people. I say, remember this. You're awesome. Keep that shit up. Talk next week.